It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show. This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to The Phil Ferguson Show, or as some people like, the cleverly titled Phil Ferguson Show. It is February of 2020. Got an action-packed show for you again this week. We have coming up a discussion on RMDs, required minimum distributions, if you have something like an IRA. We also have a nice little thing on bonds and why I'm concerned about how bonds are being bought for people or bond funds that people might have in their portfolios. So a lot of good information there on bonds because for me at least, bonds are meant to be the safe part of my portfolio. But sometimes people send me information as I allow. I talk about it on the show and they send me the portfolios that they have or what some other advisor has recommended. And I don't like what I see. So I'm going to give you a little discussion about my thought process, what to look for yourself, and make hopefully a more educated and, fingers crossed, a safer decision process when buying bonds, particularly bond funds. Also have an interview with Auburn Mullins, and my apologies to her for taking so long to get this into a show. We talked several weeks ago. It might have even been 2 months ago, but I think you're going to enjoy that. That's one of these stories that I really love to have where someone used to be religious and now they're not, and the adventure that their life became because of that process. So I know that you're going to enjoy that. Other things that I'll be coming up in future shows, I'm going to have to talk about the Secure Act some more, and I've talked about it pretty well, and most of the things are small, little positive tweaks for most people. But one thing that really is under my skin, and I just can't shake how annoyed I am by it, is the fact that if you receive an IRA from your parents or another older relative, or if you pass away and give your IRA to a descendant or children or nieces and nephews, the rules of how the money has to come out has changed significantly. We'll talk about that more in the future and maybe what to do about it. The one thing that you may wish to consider is converting some of your IRA funds to Roth IRA, because then maybe you can pay the taxes in a controlled way, particularly if you're leaving money behind to someone who has not earned your confidence in their ability to manage and spend the money. The very fact that it's required to come out in 10 years might encourage them to take it all out and spend it. If you put it into a Roth IRA, it still would have to come out in 10 years, but it changes the taxing ramifications. So I'm still not 100% sure on this, why I haven't done the segment yet, and I may have to make some fancy schmancy spreadsheets, and maybe it's just the way it is, and the laws change and things change over time. So enough on that. About Polaris, the business, my business, I am officially reopening the doors for potential new clients. Regrettably, for some of you who have been contacting me, emailing me, I think it's in my best interest that the minimum goes from $500,000 to $1 million. It is not something I really want to do. I would actually love to have, a $50,000 minimum and help as many people as I can. But the problem becomes that I don't have enough hours in the day to help. So it's a thing I'm trying to balance. It is about Phil and Polaris making money. That's an important thing, no doubt about it. But I want to help as many people as possible. And I also have this weird thing that I've talked to some other friends who are advisors, and they've said, well, why don't you just cut out all the people who have really small accounts? And I don't think I can do that. There are a lot of people that have hired me for a long period of time, and there's people that have hired me a long time ago when I needed money to pay my bills, when I was very small. And it just doesn't feel right to me to say, now that I'm making more money, you don't get my help anymore. So I feel, I guess, an obligation, a debt maybe, to continue to serve the people that have hired me already. And so I need to focus on people that are currently paying me, people that have been regular and loyal clients from sometimes many, many years, over new people that might want to hire me. So for now, it's open again. If you have assets of $1 million or more, and that's assets that can be managed. So if you have a house that's worth $900,000 and you're not going to sell it, but you have $100,000 in an IRA that I can help you with, yeah, you may have $1 million in assets, but you don't have $1 million that I can manage. So this is going to cut out a lot of people. And again, my apologies with that. The system that I put in is working well. It has freed up some time, and I think on the net, it's going to make me better. I'm not quite sure how much more efficient. I'm thinking maybe 5 or 10% more efficient, but it makes me more organized and have a better chance of doing the things that I need to do. The other fun news is, matter of fact, as I'm recording this segment, my wife is in Chicago at the Kaplan School, taking classes on passing the Series 65 license, which is the license that is required to pass to become a investment advisor representative. And over the last year or two, she's helped me a little bit here and a little more and a little more. And she was definitely very helpful getting this new system up to speed. That didn't, I expected it to take time. It just took more time than I expected. So I'm thankful, very, very thankful, Robin Ferguson, my wife, that she was so kind to help me get that up and running. So we're going to play that by ear as well. I mean, her involvement in the business and maybe helping me out some more. If that all goes smoothly, who knows? Maybe at some point in the future, I might lower the minimum, but that just doesn't appear to be the trend. Which, yay, Phil, yay, Polaris, yay, Robin. But things are going well. If anyone out there listens and does a similar business, I can attest to the benefit of marketing to atheists. And that was one of the very important things that I decided to do many years ago. And yet no other companies apparently have joined in the marketing. It's a bit of niche marketing that there's no one else. And it's not like I'm a big fish in a small pond. I'm the only fish in this pond. If you do taxes, accounting, attorney, I guess there is an attorney or two that are marketing to the secular community, but other businesses should be doing this. This is a completely and totally untapped market from a marketing standpoint, and I wanted to show that works, and it does. There's so many companies that pitch to and market to Christians, different religions, go to churches and give talks, but they don't want to get atheist cooties, apparently. And so hopefully I can help the movement, I can help the cause, I can help our entire society by showing that there's money to be made by marketing to atheists, non-believers, secularists, humanists, freethinkers, whatever label you want to use. So if you have a business, consider that. Sponsor conferences, buy ads in conference signage and the little pamphlet they give out for the convention. I can't remember the name of it, but consider that. Anyway, my rambling goes on. Upcoming events in just a few weeks. On March 1st, I will be at the Atheist Experience YouTube/video live feed thingy where Christians call in and try to convince them that God actually is real, and they seem to fail week after week after week, mostly because, and this is not just believers, but a lot of humans just do not understand logical fallacies and how we trick ourselves all the time. And so it's a great show to listen to, learn a little bit about yourself and how maybe you can clarify your own thinking processes and improve the way you look at the world, not just about religion, but other things in your life. A few weeks after that, I will be in the American Atheist Convention in Phoenix this year. Nice and warm, and it's early. Of course, it's Easter weekend. I think that's mid-April, right before the tax deadline this year, which reminds me, if you have not made your full contributions to your IRAs or Roth IRAs for calendar year 2019, you still have time. The deadline on that is tax day on or around April 15th, or when you file your taxes. You actually can do it after you file your taxes, but you would have to restate your taxes, and that can be more work than it's worth. But think about that. If you have a little extra cash in the bank that you don't need in the short run, and you have not maxed out your IRA or Roth IRA for last year, consider adding to that. And I'm going to wrap this intro segment up, and we're going to do some fun stuff with the show. And of course, I'll see you about an hour later to wrap up the show. This Investing Skeptically segment is on bonds. I'm going to go over some bond basics. If you know everything you want to know about bonds, this is going to bore you to death. But I find many, many times people do not understand bonds. And like a lot of my segments, this is inspired by a handful of conversations and or emails recently with clients, prospective clients, or just people who have questions and ask me about things. So I'm going to start at a level that may be painfully oversimplistic just because I don't know where you are coming from. You may know a lot of the beginning stuff. You may know all this stuff, but this might be for someone who's never really thought about bonds, and I can explain the way I think about them, which may not be the best way. It's just my way. So let's get into it. And we're going to talk about a theoretical bond that you buy for $100. Often you can buy bonds in, of course, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, but I want to keep the math simple for myself and not get too tripped up in what I'm talking about. If you buy a one-year bond, and we're going to start really simple, a one-year bond from the U.S. government, who is believed to be the most likely organization in the entire world to pay back that bond. And let's say that bond has a 3% yield, which means at some point in time during the year, it might be monthly or quarterly, it might be once a year, at the end of the 1 year, it's going to pay you 3%. That yield is calculated on the face value of the bond, and we're going to start with a bond that has a face value of $100. That face value never changes, but the price one pays for that bond, or the amount that one sells the bond for, can change. Let me give you an example. That bond, you put in $100. At the end of the year, you expect your $100 back, and you expect your 3% dividend because it was a 3% bond. But let's say the day after you bought it, at 3%, you decide, oh, I've made a mistake. I need that $100. I want to go now sell that bond. And clearly, for the case of simplicity, I'm not talking about including the transaction costs to buy or to sell a $100 bond, which would make it a stupid thing to do. But we're just, again, simplified. If you decide to sell that bond, odds are you can sell it for about $100 because the person that buys it from you can still make the 3% and a really low-risk bond, and everything is happy. You get your $100 back. If somehow magically interest rates have jumped from 3% to 4% in the day or two or whatever that you decide you want to sell this bond, you will have a hard time selling your bond for $100 because the person that buys that bond doesn't want to make 3% when there's other bonds now available paying 4%, assuming the exact same quality bond, issued from the U.S. government. If short-term interest rates became 4%, why would they buy your $100 bond and make 3% when they can buy a $100 bond, a brand new one, and make 4%? So you would have to mark down your bond a little bit so that person feels like they're making 4%. So you would sell your bond for $99. Now that person, when the bond comes due, gets 100 plus the 3%. They get a total of 103, but they only paid 99, and it feels like they made 4% because they could have bought a 4% bond. Of course, all this, I'm rounding time value of money, again, simplified version. And so that's the risk associated with interest rates going up, is that if you already have a bond that pays a low interest rate, it is now less desirable and you may have to sell it at a discount. One of the other things that I try to stress with people is that if you buy a bond, the absolute most you can make without accounting for any interest rate fluctuations, you can hope for 100% of your money back plus 100% of the dividend. So if you buy a $100 bond that has a 3% yield, generally the most you should expect is a 3% return, $3 in this case, and your $100 back. Right? Makes sense. Now, if interest rates fall from 3% to 2%, and you decide that you might want to sell this bond, or someone values the bond that you own, they might say it now has a value of $101. Now, the face value is still 100. That doesn't change. The yield, the calculated yield based on face value doesn't change. But if interest rates are now 2%, you could sell your bond for a higher price because that person can enjoy the 3% return on your bond and you made some capital appreciation. So that's a 1-year U.S. government bond. If you buy a 20-year U.S. government bond that pays 3%, and at some point in the near future, a few days, a few weeks from now, interest rates are 4%, no one will buy your bond paying 3%. They don't want it. Matter of fact, they don't want it a whole lot because for the next 20 years, they're locked into your measly 3% when they could have bought something that's going to pay them 4%. So again, you would have to mark down your bond from its $100 face value price to some lower number. There are, of course, very, very sophisticated and complicated formulas for all this. I don't want to get that far into it, but basically you should understand that you'd have to mark the bond down so this person effectively makes 4% per year. And this is where a calculation like duration comes into play, length of time till term, maturity. These are different phrases that one might use. If you have a 20-year bond that pays 3%, and now I can go get a 20-year bond that pays 4%, again, assuming the exact same quality, no one in their right mind buys the 20-year bond for $100. You have to mark it down. The really quick and easy way to kind of sort of look at this is that you have to mark it down enough that they can make that extra 1% per year every year for 20 years, which means, again, crudely, just for the sake of discussion, you might have to mark your bond down by about 20%. So it falls from $100 to $80. This is something that makes bonds tricksy. It's not necessarily fundamentally easy to understand. However, if you held that bond from the time you bought it for 20 years, again, assuming it's a U.S. government bond, you get your $100 back and you get your 3% interest every year. There's not a whole lot of risk in that if you hold the bond to maturity. I mean, the biggest risk is opportunity cost or inflation, things like that, but you're going to get your 3%. So when you buy bonds, or if you buy a bond index fund or a bond mutual fund, if it has a published yield, a current yield of something like 3%, that is the amount of money you should reasonably expect to make in an average year when there's no changes in interest rates. So one of the ways you can get higher amounts of interest are to buy longer bonds because, as we talked about the 1-year versus the 20-year example, you're taking on considerably more risk that the bond value may go down. the bond value may also go up if interest rates fall. One of the problems we have today is that interest rates are again at historic record lows. They went up a little bit, and then because of some economic uncertainty and the dumbfuckery of Trump and his tariffs, made the economy less secure, less certain, and the Fed, at Trump's insistence, lowered interest rates, and everyone's happy. The economy is stronger because of it. Money is cheaper to borrow. And so far, we have no signs of inflation. So the prices of bonds have gone up because the bonds that you bought a year or two ago had much higher interest rates than the ones you can buy today. So if you bought long-term bonds, and I'm going to look at the Vanguard long-term corporate bonds as an example, its yield is 3.54%. And in calendar year 2019, it returned or increased in value 22%. 22%. That is an absolutely staggering return and a fantastic return. And some people are being tempted by funds like that to look at that and go, well, I can make 20% per year in bonds. I'll buy funds like that. The idea that you can make 22% per year in a fund like that is cray-cray. It's just not going to happen. The other thing that's also weird is if you look at the 10-year performance for that bond, the average return is close to 8%. Now, most of that is because long-term bonds 10 years ago might have paid 6 or 7, maybe even 8%, and interest rates have been going down over the last decade. So you have the dividends that you've been getting minus a little bit of loss from defaults, plus a price increase from interest rates falling. So that's how you end up with a historical 8%. But if you buy that fund and look at the 10-year return of 8% and think that you can get 8% or more per year going forward, you simply just do not understand how bonds work. Bonds cannot fall as much, or the interest rates for bonds cannot fall as much in the next several years as they did in the last 10 years, unless we go to negative interest rates by a point or two. So that's just not going to happen. You're going to make about 3.5%. Now, I just skimmed over, and I'm going to go into a little more detail on this idea that you may not get all of the promised dividend payments. When you buy any bond, there is the possibility that the person that sold you the bond, the person that issued the bond, the person that benefited from making this bond, the company or the city or the agency or the stadium or the toll road, there is a chance that they will not be able to pay 100% of the dividends, maybe not on time, maybe they pay 90%. Some bonds will have rules that maybe a company can't give away dividends to stock owners until all bonds are current. Some don't. And the problem becomes that every single bond is unique. It's a unique contract. And it's one of the things that sometimes people think that bonds are simpler than stocks. They're not. Stocks are way simpler. And we've done episodes on it, but you buy a share of a company, and if the company makes money, theoretically your stock goes up, they may pay dividends. I'm not even going to get into preferreds and all kinds of alternate share classes, but with bonds, almost every single bond is unique, and you are agreeing to the terms and the conditions associated with that bond. So if you buy a risky bond, there's a chance that some of the dividends may not be paid, and or when the bond becomes due, that they may not have the funds to pay back your $100. They might only have $90 for you. Now, you might be able to sue them. They might file bankruptcy. And during bankruptcy settlement, there's a chain, there's an order of who gets paid first. And I think it's the federal government gets taxes, and then it's probably employee wages. And then it's suppliers, people who've bought or sold things to this company that owe money. And then bonds, and that can vary, okay, but the bonds are pretty low. And then stockholders are last if there's anything left over. So if a company files bankruptcy, all these different groups of people get paid in a regular order And then when you get to the stockholders, if there's no money left, they get nothing. But bondholders probably get something. And again, so if you buy a bond, and that's why bond ratings are so important. And now I'm going to take a moment to go over the ratings in general. And there's a couple of different systems, but you'll get the idea. The absolute best is AAA. That's usually reserved for U.S. federal bonds, maybe state bonds, maybe some municipalities, and maybe a couple countries around the world. But AAA, you pretty much expect you're going to get paid all the time, every time. And so those types of bonds pay very low interest rates because you're going to get it all. The next level below AAA is AA, then A. And then we go into Bs. We have triple B, double B, B, and then we go on C, D, not rated, right? And generally, triple B and above, so all the A's in the triple B are considered investment grade. So if you ever see a bond fund that says investment grade, that's what it means, that the majority of its holdings are triple B or higher. Generally, a fund that has double B, single B, or any other letter, or no rating at all, is considered junk. And those bonds will often pay much, much higher yields. And again, it's something that if a company puts out a bond that has an 8% dividend, the way I like to explain it to people is if you have a house and you have a 4% loan, would you go back to the bank and renegotiate and by choice now pay 7 or 8% interest on your home loan? Of course you would not. If you can borrow money at 4%, you're not going to pay 6. You're not going to pay 8. You're not going to pay 10. So why do all the smart people associated with this company and the underwriting of this bond, why do they think that they should pay 8%? They think they should pay 8% because they can't get money at 7. They can't get money at 6. They can't get money at 5. Somebody somewhere, maybe not you, but somebody somewhere has seen the risk potential in this specific bond. So in a specific junk bond or a mutual fund that has a bulk of its investments in junk bonds can pay considerably higher yields, but some of those companies will fail to make 100% of the dividend payments. They will come up short. They will default on the payments. Some will make it up in the end in arrears. Some will not. Some of those companies may file bankruptcy. And that's what those ratings tell you. So it's critically important that you understand the ratings of the bond funds that you use. And for me, bonds, the primary purpose for them is the cushion. I like mostly investing in stocks in the stock market because it makes 10% per year in the long run, domestic, international, all of that. That's your winner long term. That's where you're going to make the most money with some risks involved. But for the long run, that's the place to be. So how do I protect myself in the short run? I do that with bonds. I do that with safe, conservative bonds. Now, within bonds, you can have ultra short-term government and short-term corporate. You can have intermediate term, which is usually 5 to 10 years. You can have long-term, which is 10 years or more. You can have different types of bonds. You can have domestic bonds. You can have international bonds. You can have emerging market bonds, which might be a country like Brazil or South Africa, Indonesia, Chile, different places around the world. Considerably more risk, but again, considerably higher yield. And then you can also buy junk bonds. You can buy munis, which may provide some tax privilege status to some of the dividends. And you can get a really high quality muni fund, municipal bond fund, or you can get junk municipal bonds. A lot of times people think that because they're government issued bonds, they're always safe. That is not the case. You can have a municipal bond that is backed by a stadium, and that stadium fails to bring in as much revenue as expected, and the bond can short pay or default, or different things can happen. So they're not always safe just because it's a municipal bond. And you can see that in the ratings of an individual bond or the ratings of a bond fund. Typically, like I said, I use A or above, A, AA, AAA. Now, I will often add in a splash, a little bit of your portfolio, perhaps into emerging markets or high yield, aka junk bond index funds at Vanguard. And the reason for that is that sometimes those things do really well. And if you're in retirement or close to retirement and those things happen to do really well, that's a great place to skim off some of your profits. But you can also have a bond fund that loses 10, 15, 20% over a period of 12 months. That doesn't really give you comfort as heart of your cushion if that's what you're using the bonds for. If you have a bond fund that has a yield of 4% or 5%, that's getting up on the risky side for me. Matter of fact, the Vanguard high yield junk bond fund has a current yield of 4.27. So it has relatively good junk bonds, not the junkiest of all junk bonds, and it has relatively short-term junk bonds that are due in 3 years. So the interest rates are typically a little bit lower, and your opportunity to make a lot of money is smaller. However, for calendar year 2019, that fund made almost 16%. Now, you can't expect that every year, because if the yield is 4.27, at some point, if you buy that fund and the yield is 4.27, you would expect that you're going to make 4.27 or less going forward. And the less is because of slight defaults. So you might not get all the dividends. You might not get all your principal back at the end. But really safe short-term bonds are paying 2%. And these are all really low numbers. However, because interest rates fell this year, a lot of bond funds made a lot of money. We've seen some 10, 13, 15, 20%, and we're very excited about that. But if you think that indicates that that's what you're going to make going forward, you are wrong. You can be very wrong. I was recently talking to a client, and they said, how do I know which bond funds to avoid? So I'm going to give you some tips. If they're junk bonds, you should consider avoiding it unless it is a calculated small percentage of your portfolio, because from time to time you can do very well, but you don't want that to be the core of your cushion, because if the stock market goes soft and stock prices fall, if revenues for companies fall and they're having trouble paying their bills, the bonds may not be paid. And so at the very moment in time that stock prices are going down and you want some safety, you now find out that you're in a place that's not safe. That will be a big surprise to some people. I've mentioned this over the last couple of years, and so far, I've been wrong. I'll own that. I've been wrong. And like I said, I did not expect interest rates to go down. I did not expect trade wars to happen. And this is part of the guessing game that no matter how much you think you know, you can always be wrong. But with some bond funds paying 10, 12, 15, even 20% or more in the last year, those are the very funds that I would not want to own. And so when people send me a portfolio or a proposed portfolio of their current advisor and they have these kinds of bond funds, I get worried. If like I said, if you have half your money in bonds and 5 or 10% of that bond total is in these kinds of funds, okay, whatever. Yeah, I'm hoping you understand the risk that you're involved with. But if you don't, but I have seen recently several different people sending me portfolios where the vast majority of their bonds are junk. And some of the funds, when you pull up the details at Morningstar.com, are BBB, which makes them technically not junk. But some of those funds have 49% of the investments as BBB or better. I'm sorry, 51% as BBB and better, and 49% as BB or lower. So when you do the math, it technically makes it over the line to not be a junk bond fund, but 49% of its investments could be junk or worse, not rated. And so there's that. So look at the rating of your fund. You can find that on Morningstar and other websites. You want generally A-rated funds, AAA, AA, A. The other thing is look at the yield of the fund. If the current yield is higher than 5%, you should be very concerned. How are they doing that? They may have a way. I don't know everything. There may be a system, but be aware that there's a potential problem there if the yield is higher than 5%. And of course, this is early in the year 2020. If you listen to this 5 years from now, 5% may be nothing. I don't know. But right now, a yield higher than 5% would concern me. The other thing that you want to look at is a thing called duration. And I'm trying to keep my clients and myself under a duration of 5 years. And that means that if interest rates go up 1%, that fund will likely go down 5%. So the duration is something you can use as a multiplier. Again, it's a complicated calculation that they do, but it's given to you freely. Here's the duration. So if the duration is 3, if interest rates go up 1%, that'll cause a 3% drop in the bond fund. Now, if the bond pays out 3%, during the year, you might get 3% in dividends and lose 3% in value. And at the end of the year, you're even unless you took out the dividends, and then you're minus 3%. So not a huge loss, not a very big risk. But if you're in a fund that has a 10 or 15 or 20-year duration, if interest rates go up 1 percentage point in a 20-duration bond fund, you could expect to lose 20% plus the 5% dividends minus 15% net, unless, of course, some of that's junk and it defaults. So those are some things to look for in bonds. You want A-rated, generally. You want yields that are under 5%, in my opinion, because higher than that means they're playing some kind of games. And you just want to look for things that don't have long duration at this time, because there's not a whole lot of room for interest rates to go down, but there's considerable room for them to go up. The one last thought that popped into my head here as I wrap up, when you go to Morningstar.com, there's a lot of information you can look at. And sometimes you can find bond funds that are short bonds, which means they're selling bonds. And they're doing tricksky things. And a bond fund with a 4% yield keeps making 8% per year because they're doing clever things. Well, that's great until the clever things don't work. And sometimes that can be for years that they get away with it, and then all of a sudden they pop a 20% loss. It's not a conservative bond. So that's just some of the way I look at it. If I'm taking risks, I want to take the risks where I can make 10% historically, reliably, in the long run. Maybe next year we'd lose a whole bunch of money in the stock market. I don't know. That's long-term money. But in the short term, and for me, the purpose of the cushion is to be really boring and pretty reliable. I want to make 2, 3, 4%. And I know when the stock market goes up 30% or more, making 3% looks terrible. But if the market goes down 40, making 3% on part of your money looks genius. So it all depends. And hopefully you have enough money so that your portfolio is big enough that you can ride out big long-term stock market drops, which can last several years, but almost always no more than 7 or 8. But anyway, I thought I'd do this in 10 minutes. I was wrong. I'm going to wrap up here, and hopefully you learned some things about bonds. If you have questions, or if you want me to review your portfolio and look at the bond funds that you have, email me, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com. And of course, in that first email, do not send any information. I mean, your name, your email address, your phone number, but that's about it. Don't include your social security number. Don't include your date of birth. Do not include a statement. Make sure you actually typed in and reached me, and we have talked by voice before you even think about sending me supplemental information. But I will try to fit you in. I will try to look at it. I might point out a couple of bond funds that are particularly egregious. But again, you can put in the symbols at Morningstar.com if you have bond funds and you want to look for interest rate yields under 5%. You want to look for A-rated bond funds, and you want to look for the duration number. I like that to be under 5 or 6. If part of your portfolio is over that, that's great, but I don't want it to be the bulk of your portfolio. And I guess that's it for bonds for now.
How you can justify wanting to take something away from people, from 95, that gives meaning to 95% of the American people, and replace it with something that gives meaning to just 5% of the American people?
Well, what an incredibly stupid question. First, I've said repeatedly that this stuff cannot be taken away from people. It is their favorite toy, and it will remain so as Freud said in The Future of an Illusion, it will remain that way as long as we're afraid of death and have no problem, which is, I think, likely to be quite a long time. Second, I hope I've made it clear that I'm perfectly happy for people to have these toys and to play with them at home and hug them to themselves and so on and share them with other people who come around and play with the toys. So that's absolutely fine. They are not to make me play with these toys. Okay? I will not play with the toys. Don't bring the toys to my house. Don't say my children must play with these toys. Don't say my toys might be a condom. Here we go again. Are not allowed by their toys. I'm not going to have any of that. Enough with clerical and religious bullying and intimidation. Is that finally clear? Have I got that across? Thank you.
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Your investments should be based on your situation, and you should consult with your financial advisor before taking any action. The show may contain ads. These ads are placed into the show by the hosting company after I finish recording and editing. I have little control over the content of the ads, and you should not assume that I support their products or claims. If you choose to support the show via the new Patreon page, that support does not create an advisor-client relationship.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
This Investing Skeptically segment is on RMD, required minimum distribution, and their timing. So when do you need to take RMDs? So for most people, there's two ways that you might be required to take a required minimum distribution. If you have an IRA or something like an IRA, but not a Roth account, different rules, different topic, set that aside. But for your IRA, if you turn 70 and a half, if this year you are 70 and a half or older, I guess for 2019 that was the rule, brand new rule, by the way, I almost forgot myself. Starting in 2020, when you're 72, you have to take out the required minimum distribution based on your age of being 72 or older, and that is calculated at a rate of 1 divided by your life expectancy in years. So if the IRS says your life expectancy is 20 years based on your current age and their actuarial tables, then you would have to take out about 5% of your portfolio based on 12/31 of the preceding year, in this case of 2019. The other time most people have to take an RMD is that if they have what is called either an inherited or a beneficiary IRA, where someone else had an IRA, and then when they passed away, they left it to you. And the old rule was that you took that out of your lifetime. The new rule is that you aren't required to take out anything until 10 years pass, and then you have to take out 100%. Again, another fun topic that we'll talk about in other places. So if you are under the old rules for a beneficiary IRA, or you have reached the age of 70 and a half previously, or 72 going forward, you have an RMD to take. My general recommendation on this is that you generally want to take this as early in the year as possible. A couple of reasons. One is a housekeeping thing. If you set it up, if you remember to do it, you can even sign up to have it automatically happen at the very early part of the year. One nice thing about this is it's done. You don't have to think about it all year long in May and July and October and November and keep thinking to yourself, someday I'm going to have to do that, because it's already done for the entire year. Now, if you don't want to spend the money, congratulations, you're doing great. You don't need the money. You can always reinvest it once you pull it out of the IRA. So you don't have to spend it. You just have to move it out of the IRA. And the amount that you pull out must be equal to or greater than
the required minimum distribution calculation that hopefully either your brokerage firm has done or your CPA can help you with. So you move that money from the IRA. If you don't want to spend it, put it in your taxable account and reinvest it. If the market goes up, great. It went up in a taxable account instead of the IRA. But the thing that I want to avoid, other than the annoyance of thinking about this all year long and it already being done, is that you can get weird situations like 2008. Let's say you had $1 million at the beginning of 2008, and the market goes down 37%, and you didn't take out, let's just say you had to take out 5% or $50,000 effective at the market valuation at the close of 12/31 of 2007. You had $1 million at the start of the year, you have to take out $50,000. If your portfolio fell from $1 million to $600,000, you still have to take out $50,000. Now, that can be a lot more painful to take $50,000 out of an account that has $600,000 versus an account that has $1 million. Again, theoretically, if you don't need the money, you're selling at a loss, you turn around and you put it right back in the same investment. And when the market goes back, it goes back up. So you're not necessarily losing anything, but it just feels a lot nicer to take 50 grand out of $1 million and invest it than to take 50 grand out of 600,000. If the market goes up and you invested it, great. If the market goes down and you invested it in your taxable account, same thing. But if you need some of that money, if you want some of that money to spend during that year, that's part of your budgeting process. Now it becomes much more painful if you delay and the market goes down. So if you have a monthly thing set up to pay you out monthly, again, it could also be perfectly fine if part of your IRA is in the cushion, in some bonds, because the bonds and the stocks all spin off dividends with inside the IRA. And if that amount gets too low, you could sell some of your bonds and not have to sell any of the stocks while they're down. So there's other ways around it. It's just something to be aware of. If you have a bulk of your money in IRAs and or beneficiary IRAs, if the bulk of the money inside of those IRA accounts is all stock investments, think about taking it out as quickly as you can, particularly if you have a year like 2019 where the market went up 30, 31%, depending on how you look on it. And again, another show segment for that. But take it out early. If you don't need it, reinvest it right away. But probably if you're required to take it out, you don't need to keep saving it and investing it. You could go spend it and have some fun with it. So that's some thoughts on required minimum distribution and the timing of when to take those monies out. All right, everybody. Next up, I have another person who is going to be kind enough to share a little bit of their story. Her name is Auburn Mullins. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. And I don't know if we should even mention it, but how are the kids? Are they getting ready for Christmas?
They are. They're so excited. They helped me pick out their cousin's Christmas presents just last week, and they think that they're not getting anything since they bought someone else's Christmas presents. Nice.
Well, that's always good fun. It's nice to see the joy of an event like that in the kids' eyes, because I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe you still get it, but I know I'm not as excited about Christmas as I was when I was 10. So other things take up our minds and distract us.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, it's only my third Christmas, so I think I still get that jovial expression.
Oh, I could see why you would. And that goes into the reason we're talking. So let me just segue with that. What do you mean it's only your third Christmas? You sound older than 3.
Absolutely. So I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, and I stayed a Jehovah's Witness until I was 23. I had 2 kids, and things just kept piling up, and I really couldn't deal with it anymore. And I left at 23 years old. I was married and 2 kids.
Yeah.
And we celebrated our first Christmas in 2017.
you were Jehovah's Witness, and when you say that you were, is this something you joined at some point, or you were born into it? How did that work?
So I was about 18 months old when my mom joined. So obviously I don't have any memories of not being a Jehovah's Witness at all. And she was a single mom when she joined. She got married when I was 3 to my stepdad, and he's a wonderful man, just absolutely amazing. And then when I was 4, that's when I decided that I didn't want to celebrate holidays with my other side of the family. And I really don't remember any. So that's why I say it's my first Christmas or whatever after, because I don't have any memories of any holidays or anything before then.
So you said that you decided at 4.
Yeah, that's what I was,
right. Hey, so
as a 4-year-old, I made a very conscientious decision to not do that.
I'm assuming you don't remember that moment, and I'm assuming that you've been told that at 4 you decided that. Does that sound?
Yes.
Okay. So
yeah,
you're 4, and some way you stopped doing holidays, and then go on from there. How was growing up after that?
I was convinced that I was, totally okay with not celebrating those things. There would always be a Christmas party at school or something that seemed like fun, but I didn't do it. And I was just convinced that, God loves me more because I'm not doing that. So it was okay. I eventually did start feeling pretty left out when I would see maybe my extended family, maybe on Facebook, I would see a Christmas picture and I wanted to be there with them at that big family party. But it was okay. I didn't know any better or any other way, so and I didn't know exactly what I was missing out on.
If I understand correctly, birthday celebrations are not okay either?
Right. No birthday, no Christmas, no 4th of July, no Easter, nothing.
Wow, this sounds like a buzzkill, man. There's funner religions,
absolutely.
That's for sure.
I think something that's interesting that a lot of people think is very weird is that Jehovah's Witnesses go all out for anniversaries. So your parents' anniversary was kind of like our Christmas almost. Yeah. Because they would get presents for the whole family, and it would just be a big thing.
Huh.
Whereas, now that I'm not a Jehovah's Witness, that's not really... Yeah. I don't know anyone who does that.
Sure. Now, you said the stepdad was a great guy. Was he Jehovah's Witness? Did he join? Was he already a member? How'd that work out?
He was born and raised in it.
Okay. And you were not born in it, but raised in it. And through junior high and high school, how did that go? Did you still feel that little bit of being left out, but you knew you had the love of Jehovah?
I did. I was homeschooled / public school all throughout elementary and middle school. I would go to school for a year, and then I would be homeschooled for a year. And homeschooling is huge for Jehovah's Witnesses because they believe that worldly associations spoil useful habits. So hanging out or having undue association with someone who's not a Jehovah's Witness is highly discouraged. So I would go to public school, and I'm a very social person. It was hard for me not to be friends with the kids that I talked to all the time, but that just wasn't allowed. And after 8th grade, I remember my mom having a conversation with me telling me that she had talked to some of my friends, and they all agreed that school was changing me. And again, I'm 14 at this time, and I knew what she meant was that, I was getting too involved with the kids at school. So I dropped out of school. I had a 3.7 or 3.8 GPA, and I was in the top 10% of my class, and I dropped out.
Wow.
She enrolled me in a correspondence school, but I, at that time, had gotten a part-time job, and I was volunteering anywhere between 50 and 70 hours a week, or a month, 50 to 70 hours a month in field service, which is when Jehovah's Witnesses come knocking on your door. So being a 14-year-old, I didn't really focus on school at all. And that was that. I just stopped my high school education at 8th grade.
Now, you were enrolled in a school. Did you eventually earn a high school diploma?
No, I did not. I was 19 and still hadn't finished it. So I got my GED when I was 19.
Okay. And part of the logic for that, if I understand correctly, Jehovah's Witnesses, education's not that important because it's going to end any day now. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's why I got married when I was 17, is that I thought the world's going to end, so I don't want to be alone forever. I better get married now.
You mean, I'm interested by this, alone forever. So if you get married to somebody, then you have that somebody with you in heaven, and if you're not married, you don't?
Well, not in heaven, but here on Paradise Earth, because Jehovah's Witnesses believe that only 144,000 will go to heaven, and the rest of the Jehovah's Witnesses will live here on Earth and make, they'll have 1,000 years to make the Earth into a paradise again. But it's not clear, they've discussed this, that it's not clear if marriage will be allowed in the paradise. So
it's just a big romp then, I guess. You're not married.
Yeah, you might or might not be able to get married after the world ends.
And you said, I think you said it, or at least I think I know, 144,000 get to go to heaven?
Yes.
And how is that number determined?
You wake up one day and you decide that you feel like you would rather go to heaven than live in a paradise on earth.
Because I'm pretty sure the Bible says it's 12,000 men who have not been spoiled by women of each of the 12 Jewish tribes. Does that ring a bell, or did they not teach that?
Yes. No, it's based on that number, but the rest of it's all completely figurative, you know?
Oh, I see. So the number is literal, because I've had good fun with Jehovah's Witnesses at my door, where I point out to them that to be one of the 144, they have to be a male virgin Jew. And they're like, no, it doesn't work that way. How'd that
go over?
It's funny because they will suggest then that maybe I should talk to one of their leaders. And I explained to them that if this is a very, very important rule, how do you not know? How have you not been educated enough to know the answer to that question? And that kind of rattles them a little bit, because they think they know the rules, but then when I find a loophole or a detail that they don't understand, their gut response as a human is to say, talk to somebody else that does know. And I say, but you're supposed to know. This is life and death for you, and you don't know. And that's kind of the fun game I like to play. So you're married at 17, and you have a couple of kids. Is that a fair way to say it?
Yes, I had my first at 20 and my second at 21.
Okay. And at some point you started getting significant doubts. How did that come about? What triggered it?
I had doubts. Honestly, the summer before I got married, I remember sitting on my porch and telling my mom, I don't know if I believe in God. And I can't really explain where that feeling came from. At that point, I hadn't done any research or anything, but just didn't feel connected at all to anything like other people talk about. You know, other people pray and they feel God there. And I was like, I pray and I feel like I'm talking to myself. I don't know. And my mom said, oh, that's silly. Of course you do. You wouldn't be pioneering, is what they call it, when you spend 70 hours a month in field service. She said, you wouldn't be pioneering if you didn't believe in him. Of course you do. And I said, okay, I guess you're right. And then I went on with my life. And I was too terrified to do anything for years, because when you leave Jehovah's Witnesses, you're shunned.
Yeah, it's tough.
And you have already alienated everyone else in your life because worldly association is bad. So leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses means leaving literally everything. But when I had my first son, I remember they laid him on my chest And my very first thought was, oh my God, he's beautiful. But then my second thought was, I can't shun him. And it was such an odd feeling that just in that huge moment, that is when I realized I can't be a Jehovah's Witness forever.
Now, when you say you can't shun him, were you worried about someday he would grow up and leave, or that you might leave and he might not go with you?
It was more that I was worried that I couldn't raise him the way I was raised. I couldn't raise him telling him, if you don't do everything that I want you to do and stay in my religion, then I'm done with you. I'm going to cut you off.
Oh, yeah. So it was good enough for you to not fight and deal with the drama and the hassle to get out, but you didn't want to put him through that.
Exactly. I couldn't do it for something that I wasn't even passionate about.
Yeah.
I couldn't raise my baby and say, you have to stick with it because I stuck with it.
So you're having serious concerns, and time goes on. You have a second child. And did you have those same thoughts again?
With my second child, it was even more. With my first son, I was nearly hemorrhaging. I was very anemic, and I needed a blood transfusion, but I wouldn't take it because that's against Jehovah's Witness doctrine.
Wow.
And so my doctor came in and told me, you understand that you and your child could die because of this. And I was like, yeah, I get it. I've heard that before. And didn't really appreciate the gravity of the situation. And then when I had my second son, I guess something struck different in me. And I realized that I couldn't be that selfish again. I couldn't die and leave two children behind. So I kind of made up in my mind that if I needed one, I would take it this time. And that's where I kind of started to realize that I was drifting away and that my exit was coming sooner rather than later. I see. Yeah, because you don't want to lose the people that you care about. I mean, even if you don't really believe what they're selling, it's your family and it's probably a bulk of your friends because they created a world for you that became the reality. Exactly. But my own life was, at that time I was realizing, starting to become more important than my relationships with people. So did you just drift away and stop going, or did you make a declarative statement one day that you're out? I made a pretty big scene. Oh, okay. I left my ex-husband and the religion at the same exact time. And I don't want to say too much, but it was a very bad marriage. And a few people knew that already, but I left for the third time. And Jehovah's Witnesses believe that the only reason for divorce is adultery. So any other things that happen in a marriage that are very bad, you're not considered to have a reason to divorce. And so when I realized that I don't believe in this religion anymore, I realized that was the only reason I was staying in this terrible marriage. So I'm done with that too. So my boys and I left, and we stayed in a women's shelter for a few weeks. I didn't say anything to anyone in the congregation or anything that I was leaving, so they didn't really know what was going on. I said something to my mother. I called her to let her know that I was safe from the women's shelter, because when I'd left, I had just left in the middle of the day, packed my stuff, didn't say a word, and disappeared because I was scared. Yeah. And when I called my mother, she said, I told her, Mom, I'm safe. And then I said, I don't think I'll be going back to the Kingdom Hall. And I've never heard such a just dramatic and miserable and guttural wail come out of someone like that. It sounded like someone had just told her that I had been brutally beaten to death. But all I was telling her is, I don't want to go to your church. So she was pretty deep in it, and you are now basically dead to her. Yes. About, I don't know, maybe a month later, we had limited contact. And before this, I was at my mom's house literally every single day. After work every day, she babysat my kids, so I would go over and sit on her couch for 30 minutes or something and talk. And then on weekends, I would go over just to be there. I loved my mom.
Yeah.
And I went to her house about a month afterwards. I think she was babysitting the boys still then. And when I walked away, she said, Abby, which is my family nickname, she said, Abby, can I just have one more hug? Or one last hug? And it, oh my God, it crushed me inside. It was honestly the worst day. I can say that definitively, the worst day of my entire life.
Now,
because my mom just confirmed to me that I'm dead to her.
So she got one more hug, and then you weren't to come back, or you didn't exist?
I didn't exist, and I didn't give her that hug. I told her no. I said, I can't do that, and I can't believe you would even say that to me.
And did you go over anymore? Or the kids go over anymore?
The kids still went to her, I think, for maybe another month until I found another babysitter. When I went to her house, she wouldn't look at me. She wouldn't speak to me. And I would cry every single time that I left, because it was just such an abrupt change. It went from me being at their house every day just for fun to I'm not allowed to step foot inside their home, and they won't even look at me. And if she happens to glance in my direction, she looks at me like I'm roadkill. I mean, just disgusting to her.
I can't even imagine what they're telling the kids during that time.
Yeah, that was a problem that I kind of thought of. I'm trying to introduce my kids to the normal world and get them acclimated, because things are different. But they're 3 and not even 1 at this, or no, they're 2 and not even 1 at this time. So they didn't really, it's not a big deal to them. Everything is fun. But I started taking my oldest son, who's 2, to birthday parties, and he won't sing. He starts crying every time we go to a birthday party, or when we talk about Christmas, he says it's bad. And that was a big deal to me, that it's not okay for the children to be guilted like that, to be told that something is bad.
And it's one of the things I've discovered, that little kids pick up way more than we think they pick up. Because you're talking about a 2, maybe 2.5-year-old who knows and is willing and able to express to you that a birthday party is bad. And you know where they got that.
Absolutely.
Wow. So they're not, they feel bad going to parties. They don't want to participate. They don't want to sing. I'm assuming both mom and dad didn't want to talk to you.
Yes.
You found a new babysitter. What's your life been like after that?
Well, it's honestly been amazing. I look back on it and I don't regret a single thing that I handled or did. I'm engaged now to an amazing man who just stepped in, and he's wonderful. And I'm in college now, which I never thought would happen.
Nice.
I loved school when I was in it, but I just thought that opportunity was gone for me. But I'm in school and just got my grades back for my first semester, and I have a 4.0.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, that is an impressive turn to barely scrape by a year or two late to get your high school diploma, from a online program or something, to actually going to college, getting a 4.0. Clearly some rough times and heartbreaking times, but you're building a new, better world for yourself and your kids. I think that's fantastic.
It feels fantastic knowing that they'll never have to go through the feeling of, will mom support me, or what will mom think? I tell my kids all the time, it doesn't matter. I just want you to be happy. I will support you. It doesn't matter what you do.
And I think that's what a parent should say and feel and believe. And I know I've told my kids that, I have my own dreams and visions for what they might be able to willing to do, but in the end, it's their life. They have to live it. And I remember when my kids came home from Sunday school, and that's a long story for another show, but when they were young, they were in Sunday school, and they came home because they had just heard the story of who was it? Lot? No, not Lot. Abraham and Isaac, where Abraham was willing to kill his child, and they were pretty distraught about that. And it was one of those wonderful moments where I got to tell them that because I was an atheist and didn't believe in God, if I was ever compelled to choose between my death and theirs, that I would choose mine. Mm-hmm. And they seemed to be very, very happy about that. but I'm sure. But it also struck me as like, wow, what a story. I mean, and if you're a Christian, you're so deep into it that you don't even think about how fucked up that is to tell an 8-year-old that their parents, if they're really, truly good Christians, would kill you. What?
Mm-hmm. There's so many stories like that I'm like, oh my God, that was, I mean, when I was a kid, we read from My Book of Bible Stories, and it's a book filled with Bible stories, which seems innocent enough until you realize that all the stories in the Bible are about people dying.
Yeah,
and that's what we read before bed every night.
Several years ago, and they're still available, I think. There's the Bible in Legos. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
I've never heard of that.
And I've had the author on the show a couple times, and maybe we'll have her back. But it was put on sale in Walmart and many other stores because it's the Bible and it's Legos. And people would buy this for their kids, and then they would sit down and look at what was in it. And it was a very accurate rendition of the stories in the Bible. And so it had foreskins being cut off and wild beasts and genocide, and all those things were portrayed and acted out. And it was one of those things that apparently parents can segment it in their mind enough to read the story to a child or to give them a Bible. But once you visualize it, it became profane and disgusting, and people would return them to the store and complain. And so multiple retailers removed them from the shelves and refused to sell them, and it created a news story. And so for a short period of time, the books sold like crazy through Amazon and the few stores that still carried them, because they became even more well-known because of the people that hated them. But they're wonderful, wonderful, beautiful books. I do not recommend them for your kids, but I also do not recommend the Bible for your kids. So, I mean, it kind of goes that way together.
I'm going to have to look into that. That sounds hilarious.
Yeah, they're called the Brick Testament.
The Brick Testament. I love it.
Yeah, or of course you could always just look up Bible Legos and you'll find them. Absolutely delightful books for an adult to review and read. And they took years and years of fine, detailed work, because some of the scenes have literally thousands and thousands of pieces of Legos that were put together and organized and arranged for a couple of pictures.
Wow.
It's truly staggering effort that was put into that. Anyway, what else should we know about you? Because we're getting to the point where, I kind of want to wrap it up, but I want to give you that more chance to say anything to the listeners, maybe anyone who's experiencing part of what you're experiencing, any parting thoughts that you have.
I've just always said that if anyone is considering getting out sooner rather than later. That is what I wish I had done. I wish I had left when I first had those doubts, instead of letting fear get to me and prevent me from leaving, because the fear of missing out should be bigger than the fear of whatever you think will come from being shunned. Yeah. Because I missed out on a lot from not leaving a lot sooner.
And of course, I'll throw in the caveat that make sure, of course, that you have a place to go. Make sure that you're safe. And of course, if you live at home and you're under the age of 18, it might be a little harder, because you've got to figure out how to be an adult all of a sudden. And that sucks to lose all that support. But in the end, I think it'd be fair to say your life is better now than it was, and your life is better now than it would have been if you'd stayed.
Absolutely. I had that thought recently about what would life be like if I hadn't taken that plunge and gotten out and made my stomach turn. I don't even want to think about it. It's just, I'm happy with where things are right now, and I wouldn't have done anything differently.
Well, I am delighted that you feel that way, and I know a lot of people I talk to do, and of course it can be very, very difficult, painful, stressful in the moment, in the time, and I wish religion wasn't there to create that drama, because that is a creation of the religion. The religion is not helping families, it's destroying them. Thank you so much for sharing your story, and I hope that someone's life is improved and made better by this, that they maybe get the strength to know that it's going to be okay to take a different path. And I'm delighted that everything is going so well for you.
Thank you, and thank you for giving me the chance to share it.
Nothing seems crazy when you're used to it. There's so much crazy shit everywhere. We're used to it. And everything seems crazy when you're not used to it. That's why so many comics make fun of Scientology, right? Because, because it's a batshit crazy religion, but it's no more batshit crazy than, every single religion. It's just new, Christianity is super old, but it's fucking crazy. I mean, you're born a sinner. By being born, you are a sinner and you're going to hell. But you can just apologize and then you can go to heaven. No big deal. If you're a murderer, same thing, it's just apologize and go to heaven. You can be Hitler and go to confession and say, "Forgive me, Father, I killed 6 million Jews." And the priest would just be like, "No problem, say 10 Hail Marys." And Hitler goes to heaven. Hitler goes to heaven is the name of my band. Scientology is weird because it's new. It feels weird in our ear holes to hear people worshiping a guy named Ron. We know Rons in our life. He had to change his name to L. Ron because there was another Ron Hubbard in the Writers Guild. That's how recent a religion it is. And people who follow their religion to the letter of the law are just silly. I mean, I want to tell Hasidic Jews, I promise you, God will not mind if you wear a nice cotton blend in the summer. You're being fucking ridiculous. But we live in the greatest country in the world, a country where we have freedom of religion and separation of church and state, only we don't at all, and nobody says anything because we're used to it. It says in God we trust on our money. It says in God we trust above the judge's bench in a courtroom, in a court of law, where you have to put your hand on a Bible, the Christian Bible. It's not my Bible. I mean, if I tell the truth, it's because I tell the truth, not because I put my hand on a book and made a wish. That's fucking crazy. That's craziness.
You're listening to The Bill Ferguson Show.
I do hope you've enjoyed the show so far. We've got a few thoughts to wrap up. I do have a new review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, whatever we're calling it today. And this is from SummerGirl85. I find myself saying my financial advisor says, ... Then I have to clarify that you're not actually my advisor, but I get great advice from your podcast. I love everything about the podcast, with the exception of getting cheesy Christian songs stuck in my head on a loop. As an example, Jesus is a friend of mine, this is my no-no square, etc. Thanks for sharing your financial tips and great interviews. I do honestly enjoy the songs and the bits between segments too. End review, 5-star review. Thank you very much for that. And if you like the show, a couple things that you can do to help out. You can go to patreon.com/Phil. Couldn't really make it much shorter than that. Just patreon.com/Phil, and you can contribute $1 or more for every episode. If I put up a best of episode, you don't pay for that. If I skip a week or I'm late, you don't pay for that. You only pay when shows come out, so it's not a monthly commitment. It's a show commitment. It is just a way of saying, Phil, I appreciate the work that you do and just wanted to throw $1 or $2 or $10 your way to offset some of your costs and the time that you spend to give out information that helps a lot of people. So that's nice. If you don't have funds to spare, the thing that you can do that helps me out the most is go and leave one of those 5-star reviews on something like Stitcher or Apple Podcast. It is very helpful to the show when someone goes and looks and sees that there's over 300 reviews, and I think 98, 99% of them are 5-star reviews. There's a couple of 4 stars, and then there's a few people that don't like the fact that I swear. My apologies. If that really bothers you, get over it. It happens. So it's just part of my shtick. It's kind of who I am. But we're going to wrap up the show. Again, remember, March 1st, Atheist Experience. If you're anywhere near Austin, come say hello. They've got a studio audience space there where a whole bunch of people can sit and watch the show in real time, in person while it happens. And they often have a little bit of food afterwards. And it's all free. If you can afford a few bucks, give to the cause, donate to help offset the food costs for people that can't. It's just the right thing to do. It's the Christian thing to do. No, I'm kidding. It's just the right thing to do. And I will also be at the American Atheist Conference. If you've not got your tickets for that yet, it is in Phoenix for Easter weekend. It's going to be so much fun. As a matter of fact, I'll probably have to go over the list of some of the guests and speakers that they have this year. I do hope to see you there or maybe somewhere else in the future. Until then, ciao.
hit my fist like President Obama. Now, Democratic ship in the Congress, rebook. Democratic ship in the Congress, rebook. Democratic ship in the Congress, rebook. Oh, give me that Christian side hug, that Christian side hug. Give me that Christian side hug, that Christian side hug. I'm a rough rider, filled up with Christ's love. Give me that Christian side hug, that Christian side hug. Give me that Christian side hug, that Christian side hug. Give me that Christian side hug, that Christian side hug. I'm a rough rider, filled up with Christ's love. Give me that Christian side hug, that Christian side hug. I'm a married man, you know I can't hold hands. Front hug all day long with no other demands. But I ask for all of you until you say I do. No front hugging or PDA or your EG time is through. But some of y'all are slick, try to pull this trick. Your hug starts from the side, but soon it turns legit. So if you end up here, then go ahead and scream it. When I hug people, I leave room for the Holy Spirit. If a girl walks up with her arms spread wide, and she's front hug down without looking her eye, you better turn to the side, pat her on the back. Jesus never hugged. Buddy like that, screaming.